It's Monday, January 24th, and that means it's time for another episode of Chatting with Agnes and Cecilia, Nonprofit Conversations. I'm one of your hosts, Cecilia Sepp. I'm the principal and founder of Road Tulips Consulting, and I'm here with my friend and co-host, Agnes. I'm going to throw it over to Agnes to say hello.
Thank you, Cecilia. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our global audience, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Agnes Amos Coleman. I'm an author and a consultant. Over to you, Cecilia.
Thank you, Agnes. And we're really excited today because, as you know, most nonprofits are talking about events going forward in 2022. And we are really happy to have Mark Cooper, the immediate past chair of the Events Industry Council, here with us today to share his thoughts on innovating meetings and events and the way forward for us as we go on into the 21st century. Welcome, Mark. Would you like to say hello and tell us a little about yourself?
I would love to. Hello, Cecilia. Hello, Agnes, and hello, everybody. My name is Mark Cooper, and I am passionate about the meetings industry and have been in this wonderful industry of business events and hospitality since I was around 13 years of age in my grandparents' village pub in the centre of Warwickshire in rural England. So to say that I have a passion for hospitality is probably an understatement. To say that I have no other alternatives as a career because I've been in it so long is probably a reality as well. But looking forward to our chat.
Oh, that's great. I love that story because where I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, we had a lot of taverns, which are similar to public houses in England. So that's wonderful. So our topic, as we mentioned, is innovation in events and conferences. So because as we know, they're not necessarily the same thing. So what do you think is an innovation that you would like to see come along or that maybe you're already implementing?
Well, innovation and creativity, Cecilia, come in many, many different forms. And I think, as we sit and look at it, sometimes we can give it, too much focus in terms of the complexity. So the word innovation is do something big and do something bold, but actually creativity and innovation is really just about doing something different and doing something unexpected. And they can be really small things and they can be really large things. But at the end of the day, the one thing that a business event is it's a journey in a period of time with lots of things going on. So you can actually build up to an innovative conference or meeting or event through doing lots of little things. And it doesn't necessarily translate into having to spend big or put a huge amount of resource in. So as we have our chat today, don't think too high, don't think too complex, but think about how to approach many different angles and create surprises. And for me, as being responsible for a non-profit association, over the last 2 years, we've had to be creative in many different ways and move very quickly and thrill people in different ways. But what I would say is one of the building blocks to creating an innovative or creative event and the elements is, make promises in advance. And I'll give you a couple of examples. If you make a promise to say, we will have 100% completely new speaker lineup right at the beginning there, and you publish that, then you have to live by it. You can't deviate off it. You've made that statement. And so if it's a commitment you make up front, that helps you stay on the course of creativity. Things like, we will ban all PowerPoint slides. Of course, when you do that, that's not you, but it's a statement, but then you can back that up in terms of how you support your speakers and your presenters in delivering content in a very different way. And that's just a couple of ideas. But what I would say is think up front and go in with a mindset with your volunteers. If you're a non-profit association, you will have a lot of volunteers. But really, when you're scene setting at the beginning of the design phase, just remind people that we will start at a position of something completely new, and we might gravitate back to doing something we've done in the past, but only if we can't do something new. Treat a return with caution, and that's not to say that everything has to be new every single time. That would be ridiculous. But if you go in with that mindset, that will really help you.
And I know
Now,
Agnes is passionate about this too, but I just want to make a comment before
yes,
she jumps in about
Right.
PowerPoint slides. If you're going to use them, don't read them. Use them to support what you're saying. Don't read your slides. Over to you, Agnes.
thank you, Cecilia, and thank you so much, Mark, for giving us that overview on expectations. I really appreciate that. You know, for the meetings and events industry, I guess the first thought that comes to mind here, and more so now with the COVID era, what are some of the tangible ways that you would share with our global audience that we need to start to look at innovating our meetings and events that you've seen happen? And I know that your industries your organization is at the forefront of this and doing great things with this. Can you share with our global audience in some of the tangible ways?
I can share what I think is going to be our future, because of course everybody only has a mind of what it might look like, and we have no proof, no evidence. But let's look at 2019, our association, as many did, ran successful live events in a single location. 2020, we all went to virtual. 2021, we either stayed in the virtual land or we braved doing hybrid or something, of that nature. And then 2022, what's to come and what's to follow? Well, I can tell you what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from other industry association leaders out there, particularly for our industry, is that when you can meet live, when the barriers have been taken away and the ability is there to meet live, there is a pent-up demand and commitment to do so. And so if I can go live, I will attend live. And if I can't go live, I'm actually not going to go at all. And so that's a fundamental difference. I think earlier on, some of us were maybe fooled a little bit. And in 2021, we held live multi-location events. So it allowed people to come to a location that was within 2-3 hours of them. So they were not traveling East Coast to West Coast, etc. And then, but we also had the streamed hybrid virtual participant as well. They didn't want it. We had very low take up on the virtual side because, again, attendees said, I'm either going to go live or I'm not going to go at all. And that's something that we have taken into 2022. So my belief is with that huge demand, with the travel restrictions dissipating, with our concerns with Omicron, and the pandemic, moving from a pandemic to an endemic, I think we'll get a lot more confidence and we'll be pleasantly surprised by the amount of people that absolutely want to come back live. So for me, for myself, for many associations that I've spoken to in this space, we're going to focus our attentions on creating phenomenal live experiences in 2022. And if I'm going to take one difference that I expect to see that we didn't have in 2019 and earlier, we're going to expand on our off-site experiential activities, our pre and post conference ones, our ability to get out and learn from the conference room. And that's a big part of that innovation and creativity. It's getting out from a classroom and getting people with people, discovering and learning things together in the environments that our conferences are taking place in.
Thank you, Mark, for sharing that insight with us. I think it's definitely, as association community and for those of us who are heavily involved in the meetings industry, I do agree with you that on-site experience is what's going to, because that's really where the connections are made. It is where the ideas are shared, and people like to get together. This is where the brainstorming happens. But one of the questions that kind of just comes to mind is, from my experience, I feel like innovation sometimes can be stifled by organization process. So how can we ensure that our innovative ideas, as we're planning to go live with our events, how can we ensure that these ideas are implemented with buy-in from all our stakeholders involved?
Well, process, I would say you're absolutely right. It's always, I think, linked to that safety blanket of the past. So, of course, having creative free spirits in your conference management team, your staff, your volunteer bases, etc., can be a double-edged sword. You need that to a degree, but you have got to manage it. What advice would I give? I still think we're in an era, and we will be in 2022, where we will be forgiven for taking some risks and making some mistakes. Prior to that, I felt we were in these processes and it was very analytical, and we were quite risk adverse in relation to generally putting on conferences and meetings. We went into the pandemic where the gloves were off, and do what you want, there is no wrong. And I still think we should hold on to a little bit of that, that bravado and that risk-taking mentality as we go into 2022. To do that, I guess it's like any environment, a workplace environment, etc. You've got to create safe spaces for that to take place. But make it fun. You use those two words of innovation, creativity. Have a fun game that's going on within all your conference planning meetings and your staffing meetings, etc. Which was, tag everything you talk about with, is it fun? Is it creative? Which of them is it? And what's the scale? Let's red light it, green light it, orange light it, and and just publicly denounce it and throw it to one side, or and use that to challenge each other in a fun way. Maybe that's one way of keeping that at the forefront and stopping you falling back into process driven. You're going to need your your planning documents. You're going to need your checklists. Of course you are. That's important. But equally, make it part of your theme. And we talked right at the beginning about anything that's really important to the success of your event, make it public. So, if you want to challenge the unexpected, then, make that part of your marketing message, that you're going to do that. And then again, you tend to live by what you say.
Yeah, that's great. Those are great points. And I want to talk just briefly about creativity versus innovation, because I really appreciate your comments, Mark, about that. That first of all, innovative doesn't have to be difficult, but creative is also good too. I think a lot of times we get wrapped up in being innovative. And I did some research on the difference between the two years ago, and creative is like Twyla Tharp, you're creating dance, but innovative is actually something like the Swiffer, because you're taking something and using it in a new way. So when it comes to innovating meetings and events, it's using something in a new way. Like you made several great recommendations, like maybe you get rid of PowerPoint slides, maybe you have all new speakers who have never been there before. So I think creating that comfort level for our staffs and our organizations, that you don't have to do it the same old way. But if you do something the same old way, you can call it retro. Hey, we did this 10 years ago and we're bringing it back. So that can be a lot of fun too. Yeah. And the thing about traveling, I think, is getting in everybody's way a lot of times. I know it gets in my way. Agnes and I were talking about this earlier about I just don't want to get on an airplane right now because it can be.
They're great. I've been on them all the time the last few months. It's getting easier.
Oh, that's good. That's good. And is that international?
Sure. Yeah, I was in Las Vegas last week, so direct from London, 11 hours. I was in Las Vegas in November. Last week was easier than November in terms of all of the hoops that you needed to jump through. And after this week, particularly from Europe, from the UK going in and out to the US, the hoops that you have to jump through are disappearing, and it's getting. But equally, those processes in place, whether it's the airline, the testing, the cities, the destinations, the hotel properties, they've become a lot more structured now, and and it's all settled down. So there's a lot more surety traveling the last 2 or 3 months than I can remember when I dared to travel last July to Texas. I mean, that was tough.
Was that hard? Yeah. And well, that's good to hear, because Agnes and I both work virtually, so we don't usually have a whole lot of need to get on and off airplanes, but it's good to hear. We both used to travel quite a lot. I know I had a job where I traveled a lot, so I'm just kind of like, right now I've been places and done things. I can wait a few more weeks, but we need. No, go ahead, Mark.
You said something very interesting. You were talking about the differentiation between creativity and innovation. And before we moved on, I did just want to pick up on those because you're absolutely right. And let me give two very quick examples of where and why they're different. So when I think of tips to give in relation to making sure the content in your conference is innovative, create what I would term a national or a global innovations session. So on the premise that every conference, satisfaction from an attendee will come from, they say, we've taken away 1 or 2 golden nuggets from our 2 days, and that in its own right made the whole event worthwhile. The ROI was there. So create a session which celebrates those golden nuggets. Invite your attendees and those organizations involved to have pitches, a little bit like speed dialing. You've got 3 minutes to present your innovation to the audience. They could go away from an hour-long session with 15 innovative ideas, and it could be as simple as using a product or a service differently to get a different outcome. So that's one way to lock in specifics in relation to innovation. Creativity, I would say, when you're looking at a venue, is again low-hanging fruit in terms of cost. That is the food and beverage element. That's where you can be hyper creative, and as long as you've chosen a venue that can do that, surprising people, giving them ingredients, foods, presentations through food and beverage is one way of being really creative. So just wanted to share those two different angles because you're absolutely right, and I think that both have a place within every meeting in 22 and onwards.
Oh, thanks for that great follow-up.
No, that's great. I know that we're running out a little bit of time, but I think that this is important for us to share with our global audience, or to talk about it anyway, because it's an issue that we're all confronted in this era. Safety is one thing that I think that as we begin to bring people together in 2022, that we're going to have to continue to address. And I'd like to get your perspective on this, on how we can continue to assure our audiences, our association community, or members who want to come to our meetings, that it's safe to be there. So can you talk to our global audience a little bit about this, Mark?
I can do, and I'm going to, though, now talk more so as an attendee. So as you know, I have been traveling and I've been attending events. I was at IMEX in November last year, and last week I was at PCMA convening leaders, and I was running our own conference planning meeting and our own board meeting. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit as an attendee, as opposed to an industry ambassador in terms of best practice. The one thing that gives me and others the most confidence and sense of we're being looked after is transparency. It's clear information flow and clear transparency. So, thinking and investing time in clear messages, even if those messages change, because they will. I think we'll all be pleasantly surprised at how quickly we move from our current phase of measures that are put in place to attend a live meeting to what, for instance, you will see if you come together in May or June in 2022. I think we will be far closer to being back to what we remember in the past. However, with that aside, the one example I will give is that I attended PCMA convening leaders last week, 2,300 people, very clear pre-conference communications, and during the event, very clear best practice in play and rules and support mechanisms, which was good. But even throughout the conference, I remember on day 3, there was an email that went to all attendees to say, hey, we've had 5 cases identified. Bearing in mind, it's 2,300 people, so it's a drop in the ocean. But they didn't have to tell attendees, particularly on the day of the event, but they did. Yesterday, or it may have even been this morning, I received an email which was one of the several follow-ups, and they just said, just to let you know, in the interest of transparency, since a week after the event, we've had that many cases that have been reported. I can't remember, it was incredibly low as a percentage, but they didn't need to tell me that after the event, but they did. And that gave me a true sense of clarity, transparency, trust. It all comes down to trust. So create messages, make decisions around the safety of your event that will be equitable in relation to translating into trust.
That's awesome.
And it was
Thank
serving
you.
well for many years.
That's great.
That's an excellent example, because I think that's really all it takes is a little bit of communication, and people don't get upset. They know what's going on, and that gives them the security that they need, because there's a difference between security and safety. Just like there's a difference between creativity and innovation. We want to feel secure. And that makes us feel safe. So I think that's great. Mark, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much. And I hope that you will come back in the future and continue this conversation. I'd love to hear more of your travel stories. But we need to go rogue for now. We need to wrap up for this week. Agnes, any quick closing thoughts?
No, I think for me, what I take away from this dialogue is that transparency across the board. I think it's a very powerful tool. I think in our industry today, this is what we need. And when you're transparent with your processes, you will find out that you can mitigate any risk that comes your way. So thank you, Mark, for really reinforcing that. I think for me, that's an excellent takeaway that I will definitely be using in my toolbox of work that I need to do for my employer, my clients. So thank you for sharing that.
Great. Thanks,
My pleasure, Agnes and Cecilia. Been a joy to be with you both today.
Thank you, Mark. Well, and Mark, do you have a quick closing thought? And then if our audience wanted to get in touch with you, what would be a good way to get in touch?
I think my closing thought would be to anyone who looks to place a meeting at a reputable venue in the future is going with the mantra of trust thy venue. And what I mean by that is that you're working with experts from a venue, from a facilities, from a food and beverage and a culinary perspective. Why go in there feeling that you need to, design your menus, be the menu planner, create, make selections on menus, take all of that responsibility on your shoulders, where the person at the other end of the phone or the Zoom call is an expert in putting these together. So choose a venue where you trust the individuals, trust thy venue, they become an incredibly powerful supplier, and then you can focus on the other elements. And if you don't have that confidence and feel that you're having to make all the decisions that sit in a venue's responsibility, then change thy venue. So that would be my closing thought. IACC, you can search any one of the 400 IACC certified venues in 26 countries around the world and get to them directly very quickly. It is IACConline.org or IACCmeetings.com. There's a ton of research and tips and best practice on there for meeting professionals and venues alike. But again, appreciate the time, both of you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. And that's a great resource. Thanks for sharing that. So as we mentioned, we have to go rogue for this week, but we'll be back next time with another exciting episode of Chatting with Agnes and Cecilia Nonprofit Conversations. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss another exciting episode. If you'd like to learn more about Rogue Tulips, check us out at our website, roguetulips.com, and check out our education arm, the 501c League, a leader in CAE education, especially in the area of ethics. You can find the league at the 501cleague.net. So on behalf of myself, Agnes, and Mark, thanks for joining us this week, and we'll see you next time.